I forgot to mention about fabric selection for the strips in between your pages. For this book I'm just using Calico because I want to see how it looks with just a neutral down the middle. But for my first book I actually matched the strip to the colour of one of the pages. So this one I've used black, so it just looks like an extension of the page. This one has green in the middle, which sort of matches the green that's along the edge of the bottom edge of that page. So it sort of becomes less noticeable. But whatever choice you make is up to you. I just like the way it just blends with one of the pages. We'll see how the current book turns out. Once you have your book pages all stitched together, I put them into a stack and then measure how thick that is. I use centimetres, but you can use inches, whatever you're comfortable with. And that is the width that I use for my spine. Now I cut the spine out of quite thick interfacing. So I'll just cut out the piece. I use iron-on. And then I iron it onto a strip of fabric. It's similar to how we put the pages together. We've got these little extra bits which are going to go into the cover. I tend to make the spine the same length as the majority of the book pages. Stitch that down, and I've done that here, and just as a little extra touch I've just put a little piece of ribbon on the top, so that when it forms part of the book you just see a little bit of checked edging along there. That's not necessary. You just need to fold your ends under and make sure they're neat and tidy. Okay, so now we're ready to start attaching the spine to the pages. Now I can see here where the edge of the interfacing is, but I'll just put a little line there so I know where it is. It's important to stitch the pages onto the area where you have the interfacing. Now with right sides up, because the back side will be covered by the book cover, I'm going to attach this first page. Now I have taken this to the iron and just ironed down that strip of fabric so that will give me a stitching guide. It gives me a line that I can see where I'm going to stitch. So I'll place it a little distance in from that mark that I made, and I will make sure that the bottom is also the same. But first I will pin that once I'm sure I've got it in the right position. I'll just put a pin in on that stitching line that I made. Another thing too is if you line these two edges, providing you cut them straight, you can line up your open pages to that, and it should help. I'm only putting this pin in the middle to hold it for a second so I can check that I'm lining up straight with the edge of the interfacing. And the edge is there and there, so I'll make sure that that stitching line is in the same spot. I'll take that pin out, straighten it down and pin it there, and then I'll stitch that one in place. I will be stitching it by machine, but you can also stitch it by hand. Once you start adding all the pages together, it becomes a bit hard to get it under your sewing machine. If you have a long arm machine, you'll be fine. So you can actually just use a running stitch and do it by hand. But I will do it by machine. And then once that's stitched, I'll put the next page on. And now that you've got that one in, it's actually easier to line them up, because you'll line up, this will be over a bit, so the edges won't line up, but you still line up your top and bottom edges. That way your entire book will be straight. And then I would pin that, and it would probably be something like that. There'll be a little bit of a gap between, probably not that much. It'll probably be closer over there. And then you do that with all of your pages. The first page that I stitched to the spine, I used my regular sewing machine foot. But after that I had to change to the zipper foot to be able to get in here, because this side was becoming too bulky as I went through the machine. This side was flat because I only had the one page there at the time. But this side, by the time you get down to here, you have quite a big bulk on that side. So it's easier if you use this zipper foot to do that stitching along there. Once you've stitched all your signatures together onto the spine, you'll end up with something that looks a bit like this. You'll have this little flap which is going to go in between the book cover and the inside book cover. You'll have a stitching line down here, which if you use a matching thread will be barely visible. And then every other page you'll have this little gap where you actually see the spine of the book. This was the 2-page signature instead of the 4-page. So I've still stitched it down there, and then the excess material is coming out here lining up with this other one. And when we put the book cover on, that will be hidden. The cover of the book can be a little bit bigger than your stack of pages if you want it to overhang, which I probably will do. And this edge where the spine is, you only want the cover to come as to the edge there. And then it can stick out a little bit on this side as well if you want. Because if it sticks out like this, when you open your book, that edge digs into the spine and then it won't open properly. So it's important to just make your covers fit to the edge there. And then, especially if you're doing cardboard, you can stiffen your covers with either interfacing or cardboard or plastic or whatever you have. It's up to you, but make sure that you measure only from that edge to wherever you want your cover to come out to. And the actual outside spine, on several of these previous books that I did, I ended up just covering it later on with a piece of felt for the spine. I just liked the way that looked. I like to keep it soft so that it will bend when you open the book, because this is what happens when you're opening your book. That's why I like to do it with just material and a little bit of interfacing if I need to. This one, although I've used felt, I have actually put interfacing in there as well. So I've just stitched that on afterwards, but you can actually see the cover ends there, so it's the same depth as the book pages. Okay, now I've got my cover ready by applying the interfacing that I cut out to the back and the front covers, and a little strip of interfacing to the spine. You need to leave a bit of a gap in between the spine and the front covers so that your book will open and close. Now, to get the size of my cover, I had this piece which I'd previously made. If I have something lumpy that I've made, I tend to put that on the front cover. But you can do whatever you like. You don't even have to do anything, any design. You could just do it with fabric if you want to. So I started with this, lined up the edge with the signatures, and I flipped it over, folded that around, and I was able to roughly cut it out, cut down the material to the size that I need. And then once I'd done that, I put the interfacing on the front cover because that was easy. I knew exactly where it was going. On the back cover, I just put a couple of pins in where the book pages were going to end, where the page would start. So I knew where to put the interfacing, and then I ironed that on. These flaps, which are going to hold the book cover to the signatures, will be hidden when you put the inside book cover on, which is just another piece of material cut to the same size as the back, and I've just folded under one edge. That will be the edge that covers this. I've decided to not have binding this time, so I'm going to line this inner book edge right sides together this time, just a tiny bit away from the book cover edge. Line it all up, pin it, stitch it around the three sides, and then I'll turn it inside out. So that's the next step. But before I do that, I just want to show you, I decided to add the date to the spine after I cut it to size, and I knew where the spine was. I've just hand stitched that, but next time I'll probably just do it by machine. And for the inside book cover, I have actually just put my name here as a label inside the book. Next time I would probably just print a label out on the computer and like a quilt label and attach it to the inside book cover. I think that would look quite good too. You know, this book is dedicated to or created by, and put your name. When you stitch the inside cover to the front or back, the stitching line is just beyond the interfacing. That way you don't have to try and turn this stiff interfacing. The other thing that you need to be aware of is if you make your cover really stiff, it's very difficult to turn, as I found out when I did this side. It was the reason initially why I used to put the binding on, was because it was too hard to turn these stiffening. But what you could do is just do your fabric, and then once you've turned it, pop your interfacing into the pocket and then iron it on. That would be much easier than doing it the way I've just shown you. But we all learn from our mistakes.